Hi everybody, my name is Jessica and you're here with us for the Teal Table. We are the education and prevention team from the Bridge Over Troubled Waters, and I am an Enneagram Type 2.
And my name is Daniela, and that's Jessica. I don't know if you mentioned her name.
That is she did.
Oh, I'm a bad listener. I'm so sorry, but I'm an Aquarius.
And I'm Victoria, and just a cool fun fact about me is I'm a big animal lover. So yeah, I got like 5 dogs. Probably there's more out there, and 2 turtles.
Yeah, Aquariuses aren't good listeners.
So we're here just to have conversations and break the silence around sexual assault and domestic violence. We hope you'll join us every Tuesday for these conversations. And as you're probably wondering, why are we covered in teal? Does anyone want to tell?
Yeah, so the reason why we're wearing teal is because it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and we're trying to support survivors by spreading awareness. And so we wear teal. And you can join us by wearing teal every Tuesday this month.
Yeah, so we're kicking off this video because it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, but we are going to be doing these videos throughout the year. So every other week you can tune into a video, and we're really just trying to, like I said before, break the silence about these forms of violences and talk about how do we support survivors and how do we prevent this violence from happening in the first place. So today we're going to be talking about why we don't talk about sexual violence in our society.
Yeah, so I really want you to think about just even bringing up that question, why we don't talk about sexual assault or just sexual violence in general. And I think it kind of brings us back to childhood a little bit. So I remember growing up, we never even talked about sexual violence to even begin, sex in general. It was very much taboo. So even growing up, we didn't talk about sex, much less sexual violence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we didn't talk about sex either. It's almost like we don't have the vocabulary. We don't even know how to talk about healthy sexuality or healthy sexual interactions. So the last thing that we would be comfortable talking about is when those interactions are violent. Mm-hmm. And they're also highly stigmatized, right?
Yeah.
So on top of we don't talk about sex, we don't talk about sexual violence, we don't talk about really what is consent either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely think that in certain cultures it's also harder sometimes. So it can look different for different communities and different cultures. But yeah, I think definitely that, it's stigmatized, it's awkward, we don't want to talk about it, we don't know how to talk about it. And we're not taught how to talk about it either. Usually people have to do their own research or
we learn from our friends.
From our friends, yeah, and then sometimes we learn the wrong information. So we got to be careful with that too.
Or even from experience, mm-hmm. whether that be good or bad experience. If we're not learning at home, if we're not learning from school, we have to think about, are the spaces that we are learning about this, is it like you said, Daniela, is it the right information or not?
And we definitely live in the era of social media. So a lot of times we see harmful messages out there that explains what sexual violence is when really it's not the whole truth. So we also have to be careful with that too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah.
And then we might be thinking just I never got these messages, and it's one of those things where a lot of us didn't. And to be honest, I feel like I didn't really learn about what sexual violence really was or what it all encompassed until I actually got into this field. And yeah, majority of these messages that I did get was from friends who did talk about it. So a lot of those messages I think nowadays probably weren't as correct as I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we tend to think as a society, when we hear sexual violence, we think of rape, right? And rape is just one form of sexual violence. We also have to think about how sometimes verbal violence can be sexual violence. Think about sexual harassment, inappropriate touch, jokes, thinking about reproductive coercion. There's all different forms of sexual violence that young people and adults really need to be informed about, so they also know their rights and they know that they're not alone in what they're experiencing.
Yeah, and we tend to think that, sexual violence, it's a woman's issue. Mm-hmm. Well, in reality, it's not. It can happen to men as well. You may not hear about it as much, but yeah, it's not only affecting women, and it's not only a woman's issue.
Yeah, Yeah, and then also when it happens to someone, it affects the whole community, not just the person who experienced that sexual violence. It could affect their friends, their family members, those surrounding them. So it's important that we see this as like a social issue, as a community issue, not just like an individual issue. That's your problem, so it's your job to solve it. I think that's very important too.
Yeah, and we always talk about that if we ourselves are not a survivor of some form of sexual violence, we probably know somebody who is, a friend, a family member, a coworker, a peer in your class. It could be anyone. Unfortunately, what we know is that every 73 seconds a sexual assault occurs in our country. Sexual violence occurs at alarming rates. We know that 1 in 6 boys will experience sexual violence before the age of 18, and 1 in 4 girls. So this is something that needs to be talked about more, because people, like we said earlier, need to know they're not alone. They need to know there's resources available. And we also have to talk about the issue so that we can figure out what is the scope, what are the roots, and then how can we tackle the problem? How can we prevent this from happening in the future?
Yeah, definitely agree, because we can't stop a problem without understanding it. I think that's the first step, which is why we try to spread awareness and educate our communities. And it's really cool seeing, young people do it too, using social media, educating their peers. I know I said that there's like some harmful information out there, but there's also a lot of really good resources, and it's amazing to see how fast it's spreading through social media.
And Daniela, you do a lot of work in the community, and I know part of what you do in the community is giving out, you give out surveys and you talk to individuals about what they're seeing in their community. Do you want to share a little bit about what you've learned from those surveys?
Yeah, so it's really funny because, well, it's not funny, but it's interesting because it's the same thing, but with different people. So most of the surveys say the same thing. It says, yes, I believe sexual violence is a huge problem. And then the next question asks, is it a problem in your community? And everyone almost says no. No, or like not really. So they agree it's a problem, but not in their community. So, and that's what everyone in every community says. So it makes me wonder, like, well, if it's not a problem in your community, but it's a problem elsewhere, like where is it? But I think people don't want to, realize, or they don't want to admit that it is a problem, because then it becomes real to them.
Yeah, it's really hard to have these conversations. It's hard knowing that people you love have been affected by sexual violence, that potentially a loved one has caused harm. Or maybe it's hard to talk about because you're a survivor yourself and you're feeling triggered. Like it's the last thing that you want to think about. It's the last thing you want to talk about. So it is really challenging.
Yeah, I can see like examples. For example, like if a really famous celebrity comes out as an abuser or perpetrator, someone who caused harm, a lot of people don't want to believe that because they admire that. So they admire them. So imagine if they find out that it's a family member or a neighbor or a friend, how hard it must be for them to admit.
Yeah, so you're probably wondering, okay, where do we go from here, right? Like we've just listed all the reasons why we don't talk about sexual violence and a few reasons why it's important. So yeah, do we want to talk a little bit about like where we go from here, like why it is so important? I know for me, like Victoria was mentioning earlier, learning so much about sexual violence when you join the field, I didn't know about domestic violence or sexual assault agencies, rape crisis centers. I didn't know about these organizations until I was in a social work program in undergrad, and I started my first internship. So I didn't realize there were free resources available, free counseling, legal advocacy, safety planning, folks you can call and talk to day or night about what you're going through. And so I think that's one thing, is to find out where's your local rape crisis center. And if you're in the Houston area, if you're in the Pasadena area, Southeast Harris County, obviously us at the Bridge, we're here for survivors 24 hours a day. What are some other things y'all think that people can do to kind of begin this conversation?
Yeah, I think a really good way of just doing it is maybe someone who you're close with, right? Someone who you're close with, just start talking about it. Just see what happens. To say, hey, it could be a conversation about what did you learn about, this growing up? And just see what kind of conversation comes up, because you'll be surprised where that can actually lead. And then a quick Google search where you find out local resources, and maybe even just tuning into these videos and figuring out like, oh, okay, let me learn more. Like Jessica mentioned, like sometimes we don't know what consent truly looks like, or things like that. And I mean, we plan to talk about that in the future. So maybe keeping up with these videos or trying to figure out ways to spread awareness, maybe a simple way of wearing teal. And if someone asks you like, oh, like I've noticed that you wear teal quite a bit, you can just say, oh, it's to spread awareness about sexual violence. And that right there within itself helps to start that conversation, which is always a really good way.
Yeah, you can definitely do things like listen to podcasts while you're driving. Like Victoria said, watch YouTube videos, TED Talks about it. Just trying to educate yourself more. That way you can also bring this information to your friends. Or you can do it with your friends and figure it out together.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today for our Teal Table talk. Next week we're going to talk about rape culture, so we hope you'll join us then.
Yeah.
So one super easy thing you can do this month to support survivors of sexual assault is wear teal each Tuesday. What we ask is that you get with your friends, coworkers, your family, or take a selfie, post that picture on your social media sites, and then tag us at The Bridge.
And to learn more about upcoming events here at The Bridge we have two actually coming up this week. On Thursday we have our open mic night, and then on Saturday we will have a meditation event at the park. And we will make sure to include more information about that. And just please keep following us on social media or on Facebook to learn more about just upcoming events that we have.
Yes, and also if you made it this far, make sure you subscribe to our channel. And if you want to watch more of our videos, click on the bell for the notification. And if you have any questions or comments or just want to chat with us, you can comment under this video.